When Boyz N The Hood hit theaters in 1991, it wasn't just another film. It was a mirror, a reflection of every dream and every danger that came with growing up black in South Central Los Angeles. For many, it was a story about survival. But for three young men in that cast, it became something far heavier, a prophecy that life would soon imitate art. Director John Singleton was only 23, telling the world what it meant to love a place that kept breaking you. He gave voices to those who never had one. And behind those voices were faces Lexie Bigham, Diedrich Dee Goldberg, Lloyd Avery II. Young, gifted, and full of fire. They weren't the stars the world remembered. They didn't walk red carpets or collect trophies, but they carried truth on their shoulders. And in the years that followed, truth carried them away. This isn't just a story about death. It's a story about legacy, about how the streets can take everything and still, somehow, leave behind light. Because even after the camera stopped rolling, their names still mean something. And tonight, we remember them. Before the fame, before the headlines, before tragedy ever had a name, they were just boys with a dream. Boys raised on laughter, church choirs, corner stores, and the kind of hope that could only grow in hard places. Lexie Bigham Jr. came from Chicago's South Side, born August 4th, 1968. His mother used to say he had an old soul. He'd rather listen than talk, rather help than be seen. He wasn't the loudest kid in the room, but he had presence. The kind that made you pause. After high school, Lexie spent a year at Southern Illinois University. He could have stayed, gotten a degree, lived an ordinary life, but he wanted something bigger. He packed his things and moved to Pasadena to study at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the same school that shaped so many black artists before him. He learned discipline. He learned patience. He learned how to bring truth to silence. On stage, he was alive in A Raisin in the Sun. In Women Behind Bars roles that let him taste the lives of others. When Hollywood called, he answered with both hands open. Television first, then film. But the world would remember him most for Boyz N The Hood as Mad Dog, the gentle gangbanger who gave two little boys their football back. Even when he played a street hustler, you could feel the kindness beneath his eyes. Diedrich Dee Goldberg was different wild energy. Restless heart. Born in Louisiana, 1971. He grew up where dreams were often cut short. But Dee had something rare, charisma that could fill a block. When he walked into a room, people turned. He didn't need lines to be heard. His confidence spoke for him. At his Boyz N The Hood audition, director John Singleton saw it immediately. He didn't ask Dee to read, just gave him the part. That was the kind of raw, unpolished truth Singleton loved. Dee became Dookie, the kid with the jerry curl and the pacifier, always watching, always chewing on something more than candy. After that, he started to take acting seriously. In 1993, he was cast in Poetic Justice, standing beside Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur. He was 22, and for the first time, he believed Hollywood might really see him. He told friends he wanted to make movies that felt like The Block, but sounded like love. Lloyd Avery II, the last of the three, was born in Los Angeles. 1969. He wasn't from the hood. Not really. His family lived in View Park, a middle-class pocket where kids could dream a little safer. He went to Beverly Hills High School, where his classmates drove new cars and wore designer shoes. Still, Lloyd was drawn to stories that heard stories that looked like the other side of town. He painted, he wrote, he hung out with musicians, but acting made sense of everything. When he auditioned for Boyz N The Hood, Singleton saw a strange balance, elegance and edge. He gave him the role of Knucklehead, the rival gang member who pulled the trigger that killed Ricky, a moment that would become iconic and later hauntingly prophetic. Three young men, three beginnings, each walking toward the same bright light, believing they'd found a way out, not knowing that the roles that made them visible would one day blur into the lives that took them away. In 1991, they stood together under studio lights, wearing borrowed clothes and real pain. They didn't know it yet, but for each of them, Boyz N The Hood would be both a breakthrough and a farewell. In the summer of 1991, Boyz N The Hood opened across America. It wasn't just a movie, it was a pulse. For the first time, people far from Los Angeles could feel the heartbeat of South Central. The fear, the laughter, the sound of police sirens, mixing with Sunday church bells. Theaters were packed, audiences sat silent through the credits. Not because they didn't understand, but because they did. And when the lights came up, something had shifted. The world finally looked at young black men and saw more than headlines. They saw humanity. For Lexie Bigham, it was validation. He told friends he finally felt seen. The kid from Chicago who once performed in school plays was now in a film studied in universities. He was invited to readings, plays, small film projects. People said he had an honesty you couldn't fake. He still lived modestly and still called his mother every week. He wanted to prove that success didn't have to mean leaving your soul behind. Diedrich Dee Goldberg, the one everyone remembered with a pacifier, was living fast but still grounded. He'd walk through Crenshaw and people would shout, "Yo, Dookie," and he'd grin, always in on the joke. He wasn't rich, but he was recognized. He started believing he could go from neighborhood legend to real Hollywood player. When he got a part in Poetic Justice, acting alongside Tupac Shakur and Janet Jackson, he said, "It felt like standing inside a dream." He told a reporter, "If I can make it here, maybe I can make them understand us." For Dee, the screen was his loudest prayer. And Lloyd Avery II, he was chasing something different. He loved the power of transformation. How a camera could turn a shy kid from View Park into a figure people feared. His role as Knucklehead, the man who pulled the trigger on Ricky, became one of the most unforgettable scenes in black cinema. It was raw, real, and for Lloyd, strangely magnetic. He began to live closer to the edge, spending time in South Central neighborhoods where his character might have lived. Friends said the line between Lloyd and Knucklehead started to blur, but in those early days, he still dreamed of making films about redemption. The success of Boyz N The Hood was a moment of triumph, not just for them, but for every black artist who had ever been told their story didn't matter. It earned John Singleton an Oscar nomination, the youngest and first black director ever to receive one. It gave hope to a generation who finally saw themselves not as side characters, but as the story itself. For Lexie, Dee, and Lloyd, it was the summit. The moment they stood in the light, not knowing how brief that light would be. Fame never lasts long when it's built on pain. And for three young men whose faces once glowed beneath the lights of Boyz N The Hood, the brightness faded faster than anyone could imagine. Lexie Bigham Jr. was the first to go. He'd spent the years after the film working quietly. Television shows, stage plays, small but steady roles. He wasn't chasing headlines. He just wanted to work. In 1995, Lexie had just finished filming High School High, a comedy that let him laugh again after years of heavy roles. He was 27, finally, beginning to taste peace. Then one night in December, on a Los Angeles street, slick with rain, his car spun out of control. The crash was instant, gone before anyone could say goodbye. Friends from the Rebirth Drama Company held a candlelight vigil. They said he had been the soul of every room. His mother never stopped setting a place for him at the table. A year earlier, Diedrich Dee Goldberg had met his own ending, violent, chaotic, senseless. He was 22. The same charisma that once drew cameras to him now drew danger. Dee loved street racing, the thrill, the noise, the speed. But on a November night in 1994, after a race, an argument broke out. Witnesses said there were 20 men, gang colors flashing under the streetlights. Words turned to gestures, gestures to gunfire. Dee was hit, along with two friends. He died before the ambulance came. One of the men responsible would later be sentenced to death, but no verdict could restore what was lost. A life that was just learning to dream. John Singleton later said, "Dee was the real thing, too real for Hollywood, too real for this world." And then came Lloyd Avery II, the most haunting of them all. After Boyz N The Hood, his on-screen role as a killer began to follow him off-screen. He played more gang members, more men with guns. Somewhere along the way, he stopped pretending. He moved into a neighborhood known as the Jungle, the very world Singleton had once warned about. He tattooed its name above his eyebrow. Friends said he was searching for authenticity, maybe redemption. But what he found was darkness. In 2001, Lloyd was arrested for a double homicide. Convicted, sent to Pelican Bay State Prison, one of California's most feared. There, something changed. Behind bars, he found faith. He started a prayer circle, read the Bible daily, preached hope to men who had none. But one night, his cellmate, a man who worshipped Satan, decided to end the light he had found. Lloyd was strangled, his body discovered inside a pentagram drawn with his own blood. He was 36. A preacher silenced by the very evil he was trying to save. 3 men, 3 stories, each one's filled with promise, each taken by the same violence their art tried to expose. They were supposed to act out the pain. Instead, they lived it and died inside it. When Boyz N The Hood hit theaters in 1991, it was more than a film. It was a revelation. America had seen stories about violence before, but not like this. This time, the faces on screen weren't villains or statistics. They were sons, friends, human beings. Critics called it the birth of a new black cinema. But for the people of South Central Los Angeles, it wasn't new at all. It was their lives finally spoken out loud. Gunshots echoing between apartment walls. Mothers waiting for children who never came home. It was truth, projected 20 feet high. For a brief moment, the world listened. The film earned John Singleton 2 Oscar nominations, Best Director and Best Screenplay, making him the youngest and first black man ever nominated in that category. The industry celebrated, America applauded, but when the credits ended, nothing changed. The neighborhood still burned, the prison still filled, the story still repeated. And that's what makes the loss of Lexie Bigham, Diedrich Dee Goldberg, and Lloyd Avery II feel so heavy. They didn't die as symbols. They died as proof that art alone can't heal a country that refuses to confront its own reflection. The same world that praised their performances still judged the people they represented. The line between fiction and reality wasn't blurred. It was erased. In America, their names faded quietly. No headlines, no retrospectives, no red carpet tributes. Just 3 young black men, gone before the world ever learned to say their names. Right? But in barber shops, church pews, and college classrooms, their stories still surface. People talk about how Boyz N The Hood made them feel seen, and how their deaths made that visibility hurt. Across the ocean, the film found a second life. In London, Paris, Johannesburg, students studied it as social history. They said it showed them the cost of being young and black in America, the beauty and the burden of survival. Yet for Americans, it remains an open wound, a film that told the truth once, only for history to repeat it again and again. Because Boyz N The Hood was never just a movie. It was a mirror America kept turning away from. And every time we look back, the reflection has only grown clearer and sadder. Some stories end quietly. No headlines, no closure. Just names carried in whispers and faces that live only in memory. For Lexie Bigham, Diedrich Dee Goldberg, and Lloyd Avery II, the curtain fell too soon, yet even in their absence, they left something. No camera could erase. They left the truth. Lexie, with his gentleness, showed that tenderness could exist even in a world built on survival. He made people believe that strength could look like kindness. Dee carried the rhythm of the streets in his soul loud, chaotic, joyful, He reminded us that laughter in dark places is not denial. It's defiance. And Lloyd, the most conflicted of them all, became a symbol of how easily art can become prophecy. His story, tragic as it was, became a sermon about redemption, about faith, about the weight of every choice we make. More than 30 years later, Boyz N The Hood still plays sometimes late at night on an old TV screen. People watch, not for the gunfire or the heartbreak, but for the humanity that never fades. For the young men who stood in front of a lens and gave us themselves. They didn't get statues or lifetime awards. They got something harder to hold: immortality in the hearts of those who remember. Because legacy isn't measured by fame, it's measured by truth, by the echo you leave when the world stops listening. To everyone who grew up on those streets, and to everyone who's ever lost someone too soon, this story is for you. Remember their names. Say them out loud. Let them live again in the telling. And if this story found a place in your heart, share it.